just over 24 hours on. Karen, should we be mourning the defeat or celebrating the progress yet again of these Lionesses?
Well, I think we've obviously got to be disappointed you get yourself to a World Cup final. We probably didn't impose ourselves as much as we wanted to. But at the end of the day, I think we did everything we could to get back in the game. We changed shape, we changed personnel. I think sometimes you just got to hold your hand up and say, we're beaten by the better team. I thought Spain now dominant women's football, under-17 champions, under-20 world champions, senior world champions. Barcelona dominate European football. So I think, look, technically and tactically, I'd say Spain were better yesterday. And if that happens in a World Cup final, then they deserve to win. So, yeah, it's a tough one for us. But I still think at the start of the tournament, if you'd have said to us to get to a World Cup final, we would have taken that given the injuries and the journey that we'd been on. So I think overall we did well, but we got beaten by the better team.
I suppose particularly tough to take because we've all built up so much belief in this England team with Sarina Wiegman in charge. It's incredible to think it's a first competitive defeat. Yeah,
and I went into the game like super confident. I think we were favourites in my head. We were. I just thought this group had a mentality that I've not seen from the men's or women's team actually. And I thought we'd go into it with that winning mentality. There was something different, there's a feel about it. And you're right, the manager is different. It's been the best signing for me the FA have made, bringing her in. I thought what she's done for the group has been incredible. We're already European champions and led us to this World Cup final. But I have to say, Spain have world-class players. You know, Bonmati, unbelievable, we couldn't get near her. And we just couldn't deal with them tactically yesterday. And that's why she had to change shape in the second half.
So you see this as progression, basically. Let's chart, though, the history of the progress. And we were talking about this earlier, Karen, and we've gone all the way back to 2005. Tell us why. I
was young then, that's why. No, I think, look, for me, this is the journey, really. 2005, we hosted the European champions. We didn't get out the group. Then we qualified for the World Cup in 2007. It was the first one for a significant amount of time. And then 2009, we got to the European Championship final. Runners up, we got absolutely battered by Germany. Got taught a valuable lesson. And then for me, 2011, then when the WSL was formed, and it was off the back of that European Championship where we thought, right, we've got to do something here for women's football. And then the catalyst started, really. And, you know, quarter-final stages there twice. And then we went for a bit of a phase where I thought the group struggled. And then again, third place, that was another catalyst. And then it was about how do we get from, you know, bronze to silver, silver to gold. And still not quite figured it out, but that's been the journey. But it's been in the right direction for me.
Talks about the sort of the drive of the WSL being formed in 2011 and being a big stride forward. Now, I don't know if people will be aware, but Karen is chair of, or was chair of the government's review into women's football. So you're talking from a pretty qualified position here, but what needs to happen next then to keep this momentum pushing forward?
I think success washing sometimes where with women's football there is a bit of an Insta versus reality where certain parts of the women's games are really lovely and glossy, they're really, really good, but there's elements that aren't good. And I highlighted that in the review. You know, players in the championship still on £5,000 and working 3 or 4 jobs. So then when you play quality opposition, just the level of competitiveness isn't there. The minimum standards, the facilities, still not quite good. Well, they're not good enough. You know, female players being treated as second-class citizens. That's not that's not my opinion. That's what was told for me throughout this whole review. So there's still some real big foundations that we need to fix. You know, the Lionesses in the top part of the pyramid is thriving, but there's the pipeline, you know, the academy deficit is 88 million for boys, 3.25 for girls. Some parts of that pipeline, academies isn't funded, so there's a large group of girls that aren't getting any funding to get to the next level. And I think the big one is we've saw now since the European Championships and in the World Cup finals, there's millions of people that are watching it. There's loads of people getting inspired, not just little girls, everyone's getting inspired. But I think we've got to then create the facilities for those that want to play. and there isn't enough facilities. There isn't enough facilities that are adequate for women and for young girls. And there needs to be more funding in that. And
Does that come from the big clubs?
you know, everyone's got a responsibility. Government do, clubs do, sponsors. Everyone has a responsibility to help with the investment of the women's game, really. I've mentioned it time and time again. It's a start-up business. It really is that, you know, if I went to a certain programme and said, look, how many millions of people are watching this? You know, this is a great return on your investment as a business, but we need to put into it and you'll get out of it in the long term. People laughed at me when I said, look, I believe it could be £1 billion industry in 10 years' time. They really did. But when there's millions of people watching it, there's just something that's not quite right in the planning, and we need to get that sorted. But there's appetite, there's conversations. It's going in the right direction, but that's why the review was so important, because there's still that Insta versus reality. We need to fix that reality for the sport to really thrive, because it's built on sand still. It's not built on solid foundations. One part is thriving, that's the Lionesses, that's the England team, but the rest needs significant help to get to that level.
Do you think the clubs aren't investing because they're not making money from it? It's actually a loss maker, the women's game right now. Do you think that's what's holding them back?
Men's football doesn't make profit. What clubs do in men's football is they invest in it. They're okay to have that loss, but the overall asset of a football club grows. And also, I'd argue that are the books correct that are published about women's football? There's a lot of stuff as well where, you know, if a brand sponsors a football club and they say, we sponsor the football club, well, how much goes to men and how much goes to women? Or is it the club, yeah, we fund the women? Well, how much is that? I went somewhere last week.
What should it be compared to the...
I think big brands should go, if we're sponsoring a football club, and this is just my personal opinion, if a big brand is going, we're going to sponsor your football club, go 50-50. Invest and say, look, I'm giving 50% to the men and 50% to the women, and state it. Because as a brand, when you're sponsoring something, in my opinion, that's a big audience. It shouldn't just be one type of audience. And I think brands have got to do a better job of that as well. I went somewhere last week or the week before and I had an argument with someone and said, are you sponsoring this team? I said, yeah. And I said, well, are you going to make sure that that funding goes equally to the women's team? And they were like, OK, we'll look into it. But if you're sponsoring the whole club, you have to be really clear on that. So for me, there's still lots of issues that need to be raised. The sport has had a spotlight shone upon it, which is great. But we still need to keep pushing the agenda, because there still needs to be so much more to be done, because these are incredible behind us. We got to European Championship finals, won it, and got to a World Cup final. That's immense. And that's not even our strongest team. But to keep doing that on a regular basis, to dominate world football, we need to get the pathway, we need to get all this stuff right.
I've seen it said today, and I've seen it previously as well, that when we're talking about WSL teams, I've seen it said that they should be playing in the biggest stadia, in the men's stadia, to sell out crowds, to progress the game. Do you actually subscribe to that theory?
Well, I think as well, sorry, Dad, it's main. I think we need to even say that main stadia now. I think even it's owned by the club stadiums, you know, and I think we need to keep educating ourselves on that. And I think, look, whatever strategy the football club goes towards, I think we need to get as many people in the stadium as possible, whatever strategy that is.
Well, the reason I said that and phrase it like that in a very clumsy fashion was because it's also been suggested that some football clubs should be, and I think some are, building stadia separately, which will be the main base for women's teams.
I think the issue at the moment is for the clubs that are going into main stadia, it's difficult for them in their eyes to, again, what Jamie said, we're seen as operating at a loss. But again, see it as a start-up business. Sometimes you have to lose a little bit to get it back. For those clubs that are playing in second stadiums or stadiums that are not the main stadia, they're just miles away for people to get to. They're not have the facilities that are good enough for fans to go to or enjoy the situation. So you're right. The ideal thing is to build stadiums that are new, fresh and innovative, maybe on the same site as where the main stadium is at the moment, and have it as a second one and kind of jump in between. So every club will have their own strategy, but what I would go back to is find the right one for them, make sure the fans have a good enough facility that they enjoy, that's adequate enough for everyone to be there. Right now, that's not the case. even travel, Dave. There's some stadiums that are miles out of the vicinity for where the actual club fans are, and it's difficult to get there. Then how are you ever going to get bums on seats? So there's a lot of stuff that we need to go back to the strategy, and I think it will move forward. But again, we have to keep shining the light on the sport and some of these difficult issues, because we won't get to the place where I think it could be. If we do, I really do stand on this point, and I don't care how many people laugh or tweet in or whatever it might be. I really do believe if you got the right strategy, it would be £1 billion industry. I really believe that.